So I don't think there's one right way to heal. And one of my biggest red flags in life is when someone tells you there is. And I see this happening on both sides of the spectrum. So there are some people in the holistic world who will make you feel like if you take medication, you somehow failed or took the easy way out. I don't really believe that. But I also see the exact same thing happening in the other direction. And I've personally had this said to me multiple times. I've had people who were very medication focused imply that because I healed myself from the ailments I was once diagnosed with, and because I'm not on any medication today, then maybe what I once struggled with was either not that serious or they've implied that I didn't really have that ailment or disorder at all. Now, I find that viewpoint demeaning to me and to the massive amounts of work it took for me to get where I am today. Because if I could put a camera inside my life and show you the level I suffered and the amount of work it took me to get from where I was to where I am today, I mean, it was really hard. There were periods of my life that were really, really difficult. When people impose this viewpoint on me, it would be like me turning around to somebody who takes medication and saying, well, maybe you're just weak minded. Maybe you don't have the willpower to do this without medication. Maybe if you worked harder, you wouldn't need it. Now, I would never say something like that to someone. I don't really believe that. But do you see how offensive that sounds when you flip it around? Both sides are doing essentially the same thing. They're taking their own experience and saying, this is what worked for me, so this is what should work for you. And I just don't believe that. Our next step in evolution is going to be supporting others' paths, even if they are not the paths we would choose for ourselves. We will celebrate the diversity of the human experience. And I'm not talking about skin color. I'm talking about the diversity of thought, beliefs, pathways, and experiences. Some people genuinely feel like medication saved their lives. I believe them. Some people had horrible experiences with medication and found a completely different way of doing things that worked better for them. I believe them too. Some people use medication and go to therapy and take herbs and change their diet and meditate. Well, great. Someone else's successful path doesn't threaten mine, and mine shouldn't threaten theirs. And I think I feel so strongly about this because I've had to figure a lot of this out for myself. I was put on antidepressants by the time I was in 8th grade. I struggled with depression and anxiety when I was young. I was later diagnosed with ADHD, and I spent years in the thresholds of addiction, often on the brink of death. Today, I'm 9.5 years sober, and somewhere along the way, I became a holistic herbalist. I'm on no medication, I don't drink, I don't use drugs, and overall, I live a relatively peaceful and balanced life today. There are times where I feel sad, but I don't have a depressive imbalance anymore. There are times I can feel anxious, but I do not have an anxiety imbalance anymore. I personally viewed those clinically diagnosed disorders of mine as imbalances, pointing me to more important information. When people hear this about me, they'll sometimes ask me, okay, so what did you do? And that's where I almost don't know how to answer them because there wasn't one thing. There wasn't one herb. There wasn't one supplement. There wasn't one diet or one spiritual practice or one realization where suddenly I was like, oh, that's what was wrong with me. It was a culmination of things. And there were different periods of my life where I needed different things. So when someone asks me what I did to heal, the real answer is that healing didn't come to me under one framework. Also, the body is a symphony, meaning physical ailments can affect mental and emotional well-being. Mental ailments can affect physical and emotional health. Spiritual sickness can affect all of it. Humans have mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies, and they all interact with one another. And I think that's ultimately why I don't believe there is one right way to do it. Now, I could sit here and give you this massive list of everything I've done over the last however many years, but first of all, we'd be here forever. And second, I actually think that would be really overwhelming and probably not very helpful because I didn't do all of those things at once. It was much more like, what is the next indicated step? There were times where that next step was physical. Maybe I needed to look at what I was eating. Maybe there was a nutritional deficiency that needed to be addressed. For example, there was a time where my vitamin B was very low. That will make you depressed, so that needed addressing. I have had times where my blood sugar levels were completely out of balance. That will definitely affect your mental and emotional well-being as well as your sleep and other things. I lost an ovary a few years back, and that threw my hormones into absolute chaos, so balancing hormones needed addressing. Those are just a a few examples of times where what was happening physically with me needed addressing as it was affecting also my mental and emotional well-being. And then there were other times where I could change every eating habit and take every supplement in the world, and it wasn't going to fix the fact that the way I was thinking was making me miserable. I had very few tools when I was younger. I didn't understand my brain. I didn't understand my sensitivity. I didn't understand my nervous system. I didn't understand why certain environments seem to affect me so much more than they seem to affect other people. And I also didn't always know how to deal with uncomfortable emotions. So some of the work had absolutely nothing to do with an herb or a supplement or my diet. I needed to learn different ways of thinking and feeling. I needed emotional tools. I needed to better understand myself. There were times where spirituality became really important. There were times where sobriety was obviously the thing that had to come first because I wasn't going to address much of anything while I was actively trying to escape my life. And there were times where what I needed wasn't another thing to fix it all. I needed to understand, honor, and accept certain things about myself. I'm more sensitive to certain things. I don't need to force myself to function like everybody else. Maybe there's a way to build my life around who I actually am instead of constantly trying to become some version of normal that I'm not even sure even exists. And that's what I mean when I say the combination changed. Healing wasn't this checklist where I figured out all the things that were wrong with me, fixed them one by one, and then graduated. It's still changing. I'm still changing. And when I was younger, the framework that was essentially given to me was you have depression, for example. This is a chemical imbalance that you were born with that needs medication. Now, I understand why that framework helps people too. For some people, finally being told there's a reason you feel like this and there's a treatment available can be an enormous amount of relief. But for whatever reason, that explanation never completely sat right with me for myself. I kept wondering, but why? What else is going on? Was there something physically contributing to this? Was there something about the way I was thinking or behaving? Was there something that I wasn't getting nutritionally? Was I living in a way that was completely incompatible with my nervous system? And over the years, oftentimes the answer was yes. Sometimes there was multiple yeses at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean I've discovered the universal cause of depression or anxiety. I haven't. It means I became curious about my own experience instead of assuming there could only be one explanation for it. And I think that curiosity changed my life, but I also had the capacity to do this. This is where I think some people, not all, but some people in the holistic health world sometimes lose people because it's really easy to tell someone, change your diet, go to therapy, meditate every day, cook everything from scratch, get outside every morning, take these supplements, work on your nervous system, and address your trauma. They're telling this to someone who is hanging on by a thread and already in over their head in life. Healing takes capacity, and not everyone has much capacity to give. I just like to acknowledge that when I talk about what I've been able to do for myself. I don't have children. I have a supportive spouse. I've been mostly financially stable for most of my life. Over the years, I've had enough space in my life to spend a tremendous amount of time learning, experimenting, and figuring myself out. What if my circumstances had been completely different? What if I was a single mom with 3 kids working 2 jobs, just trying to keep everybody fed and get through the week? Would I have had the capacity to do everything I've done? Maybe, but it would have been a whole lot harder. Not impossible, but a lot harder. Humans are not robots. We don't have identical bodies, brains, personality profiles, responsibilities, finances, support systems, or amounts of time. The best healing plan in the world isn't very useful if the person doesn't have the capacity to actually live it. If I could offer a piece of advice, I would say never seek out that one thing. Today, everybody wants that one thing that will change their life, and that just rarely exists. I stopped eating this and my life changed. I started taking this supplement and this ailment disappeared. I have things where I could sit here and say, doing this changed my life. I really do. There are herbs I love. There are supplements that have made a noticeable difference for me. There are spiritual practices I don't know where I would be without. Sobriety changed the entire trajectory of my life. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't share those things. But for me, it was never one thing. Humans don't really work like that. And for me, there is always a combination of things since we are a symphony with a combination of bodies inside one perceived body. I can tell you why I love something. I can tell you what it did for me. I can show you how I use it. I can show you the research behind something when there is research. And then you decide whether it resonates and it's something that you want to explore. That's very different from me saying you need to do this. I'm going to talk about a lot of different things on this channel. And I really don't want someone watching all of that thinking, okay, I apparently need to do 37 things now. No, please don't do that. Because that's another thing I've learned. Overwhelming yourself can become its own problem. I know this from personal experience. You get excited, you decide you're going to completely change your diet. You're going to start exercising 6 days a week, meditate for an hour, take 12 different supplements, go to therapy, start journaling, wake up at 5 in the morning. And 3 days later, you're exhausted and you've dropped all of it. Maybe you don't need 7 new things. Maybe you just need 1. Maybe you have the capacity for 2 or 3 things. And maybe 6 months from now, you're ready for something else. I think there's something to be said for paying attention to what keeps pulling at you. What are you curious about right now? What feels doable? What feels like something you could actually incorporate into your life without turning healing into another full-time job? And I don't mean ignoring medical advice or something serious that's going on. I'm talking about the day-to-day work of building a healthier life. And don't focus on the bigger picture. Focus on the next indicated step. Sometimes the next indicated step is finding a therapist, or it's getting blood work ordered, or it's improving your sleep hygiene, or having better boundaries with your phone and social media. I think we need more humility around healing. I've had enough things work beautifully for me to believe very strongly in them. I've also had enough things that were supposed to be amazing do absolutely nothing for me. And I've lived long enough to watch my own needs change. So I have a really hard time believing anybody who tells me that they have figured out what everybody needs. Maybe you figured out something important that works for you. Share it. Maybe you found something that has changed your life. Please tell people about it. There's a huge difference between saying this helped me and if you're not doing this, then you're doing healing wrong. And I think we need to give each other a little bit more room for that because someone else's successful path doesn't threaten mine and mine shouldn't threaten theirs. So if you're watching this because you're struggling with something, or maybe you're just trying to feel better than you do right now, I don't want you to leave here with some giant list. I'd rather you leave with a question. What's my next indicated step? Not do I completely heal myself? Not what are the 25 things Erica did? What's the one next thing? What do I have the capacity for right now? What am I curious about? What have I maybe been avoiding that I know needs some attention? Because when I look backward at my own life, that's really what happened. One step led to another, then another. All I did was just compile a bunch of one steps at a time that now look like a lot of steps, but they were just one step. Sobriety opened doors that I couldn't have opened while I was using. Understanding my physical health helped me understand my mental health differently. Learning about my nervous system helped me understand parts of myself I spent years judging. Herbalism gave me another way of supporting my body. Spirituality changed the way I relate to suffering. And understanding neurodivergency helped me recognize that some things weren't necessarily ailments I needed to cure. Some things were differences that I needed to understand. None of those things alone explains where I am today. Together, they tell a much bigger story, and I'm still living it. So if you're new here, I'm a sober, world-traveling, holistic herbalist, and if any of those topics resonate with you, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel.